Welcome everybody to the next edition in our series of Zoom interviews with the BC provincial election candidates in the Abbotsford area. And today we're joined by Aeriol Alderking from the Christian Heritage Party of British Columbia. Welcome Aeriol, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Just for those of you that have not watched one of these interviews or haven't listened to an Abbotsford Today podcast before, just to lay out a couple of the ground rules on this new format. We have invited all of the candidates that are participating in the provincial election throughout the three ridings that cover Abbotsford to come and participate. A couple of those interviews are already on Abbotsford Today, and we've got more to post. It is a casual conversation with these candidates, and hopefully you'll get to know more about them on a personal level. It is not a strict Q&A, although I'm going to ask some questions. It's also not a debate, so we're going to talk about some issues today. But if you'd like to see the other side of those issues, I invite you to go and watch the other videos. You can find Aeriol all over the net, by the way. She's you just hit up Google. She's got such a unique name, and you can when she starts talking in a second, you'll see her name right on the screen, and you can just Google her, and there are not 50 of her on Google. Her name is not Bob Smith or John Jones. It's pretty unique. So go look for her. And also, of course, you can find her through links on the Christian Heritage Party of British Columbia website. And we'll talk about some more ways to get in touch with her later. So again, welcome, Aeriol. And you know, just to sort of kick us off here, you and I have come into each other's orbits through politics for a number of years now, going back to actually before Plan A, which started in 2006 here in Abbotsford. And you've been involved in politics at the civic level and at the provincial level, and I would imagine probably at the federal level. So maybe a good place to start is to maybe get the story, your origin story, your superhero origin story. Tell us what got you involved in politics, what got you interested, where you come from in life that brought you to politics here in Abbotsford.
Well, I think the most serious issue that really got me interested, I didn't even consider it politics at the time, but was suicide in youth. And my son had a number of friends that were suicidal. He was struggling. There were 6 youth in Abbotsford that tried to commit suicide. I was starting to realize that this was a huge problem for First Nations. And so I started working on spearheading policies, and I kept at it for 10 years through the parent advisory councils and eventually up to BCC PAC, writing resolutions and really wanting something to happen. And eventually there was a crisis prevention line that was created by the provincial government. And then through that, I was chosen as one of 10 parents to speak to Christy Clark about the mandatory PE coming in at the grade 12 level, which many parents were upset about. And I took that opportunity to jump on the personal development program, which was a lot of make busy work and was keeping children from getting electives that would help them in their careers in college and so on. So all 9 parents jumped on it with me, and Christy Clark was completely shocked and changed the program. It was changed within 3 months. So sometimes government can move fast and sometimes it moves atrociously slow. And you just have to keep on being the squeaky wheel, and eventually someone gives you some grease.
Yeah, and so you thought, gee, that worked good. I'm going to be part of government now. Was that your inspiration? I'm going to get stuck in there, and if I get elected, I'll be able to make changes more rapidly. Was that your thinking?
Well, I think, like one of the things that happened was the funding was cut through bingo, which was a big part of the funding for MOIT. And so I went to BCC PAC and said, look, this is going to really create problems for parents to continue to be involved. And I wrote resolutions that saw $10 million released across this province to keep the parents' voice at the table at the provincial level. And I thought, there's really a lot of ways. I've always been an advocate for people that are struggling with different issues or having problems. I'm not afraid to go and talk to MLAs. To me, I'm not into celebrity status. That doesn't affect me. So I would take parents along with me and make appointments and take them to talk to MLAs and get involved and help resolve some of the issues in our community. So I've worked with BC Housing, Public Trustee, the Supreme Court level. I've written affidavits for children, for parents, all different things. Yeah, so advocacy is just what a politician does, right?
Well, I'd like to think so. That I would like to think so. So you're, so we have the strangest campaign maybe in the history of British Columbia going on right now. And I think in the introduction, I failed to mention that you're running in the Abbotsford-Mission riding, but that you're running out there. And I know in the old days, we shake hands and kiss babies. That's what politicians used to do. And now it seems to be, it's all social media and telephones and things like that. But during your campaign, you've obviously been talking to voters out there. What's bubbling up as as their number one issues? And we all watch mainstream media and they identify some things. Are you hearing the same things from the voters you're talking to, or are you getting some different stories, and what might those be?
Well, I think number one, and I've been asked personally by teachers to make this a number one issue, is parental rights. Because the fact that the school can refer children to a doctor without parents' knowledge or permission, a lot of teachers find that terrifying. And the public is not really aware of this legislation. It's been terribly politicized through a particular word that people get all up in arms, and they lose sight of listening to each other. And what they don't understand is that sometimes governments will roll another part of legislation within a program that people aren't aware of. And so then they can get it passed through. One of the things that's really awful in this province that people aren't aware of is the 1933 Sterilization Act. That act was in effect until 1973 when it was repealed. My first job out of high school was working at Woodlands, which was originally the BC Mental Hospital. And I can guarantee you they were still sterilizing people at that point. They sterilized Aboriginal people, people that had disabilities, anybody they considered feeble-minded was targeted. But that was still continued on even after that act was repealed, and now it's been reinstated through SOGI. And so I'm not anti-gay. My daughter's a lesbian. I've never rejected her, and I wouldn't. She's my own daughter. But there is a problem with this legislation when they've resurrected this same act and the same eugenics board of schools, psychiatrist, and judge to silence parents who want to warn other people about what's happened to their children, silencing any criticism that foster children are being targeted. 54% of foster children are Aboriginal children. And if you talk to the Aboriginal community, they're well aware of the fact that this sterilization has been going on, and it is considered by them to be a slow form of genocide. So this is something that's historically awful, and we need to just take responsibility for that and end it.
So I imagine that if we began to talk about that, we could talk about that for hours. Is there, for those listening, is there, if they wanted more information on that we could direct them to, connecting with you on Facebook or something like that?
Absolutely. You can write to me directly at votealderking@startmail.com, or you can go to chpbc.ca and look up candidates, and I'm there. I do respond to all my emails. You can call me at 604-825-7198. I respond to phone calls as well. Yes, yeah. Because this is a very serious issue. And the other issue is the NDP Infants Act that undermined the parents and police ability to go in and rescue children as young as 12 that have been lured away by predators into drugs and prostitution. So these are two very serious attacks on the family, and this is something that is in the public interest for them to know. So that absolutely has to be addressed. I would say the next thing that everybody's concerned about is the economy and getting things up and running again. Nobody's interested in a new normal. They want to get back to the old normal where they're working, where they have the normal hours. You can go and bank. Like my bank's open from 10 to 5, Monday to Friday. How does that help anybody? People that are working can't access, they want everything done online, but I can't pay bills at the ATM, and not everybody wants to go online to do these things. They may not have a computer or a secure line. It's very frustrating for a lot of people to deal with these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for giving out your contact information there. I don't want to make light of those issues by passing them by here, and so so please, if you want to talk to Aeriol a bit more about those, please contact her. And it is something that we can talk about a little bit more in the future, because I want to roll around a lot of things, and we're a couple days away from voting, and so that's that's on people's minds. I think there's I think you and I are both aware that there is quite a steep educational curve when it comes to voters. It's a steep one, and we get their attention. Both the media and politicians in the last week before a vote, but their attention can be quite fleeting. They hit on some issues and they vote, and then they go back to their regular lives. So so let's endeavor to pick up those issues in the future. I think you'll find that this isn't a scary proposition, talking to the media, and maybe we'll do it again in the future. So picking up on those issues and some of the so I'd like to extend that a bit further to the party. So I don't think a lot of people know about the entire CHP platform, particularly here in BC. They're not yet running a full slate of candidates. So maybe you could kind of talk about, we talked about, what are some of the of voters talking to you about, and some of the issues that are important to you. What's the Christian Heritage Party focused on, and what are they, what is their sort of, a couple of issues on their basic platform that you could discuss with us?
Right. Well, first of all, I mean, it's pretty hard to run a full slate when you've got a snap election. I was out camping when I got word that there was an election. So I came back with 4 days to get enough signatures to be in the race. And some of our people got disqualified because some of the signatures got disqualified. And in one case, it turned out the auditor hadn't renewed his papers. So, so this is, it's hard when it's last minute. You can't go back out there and correct things. The Christian Heritage Party has been in BC since 2012, and we've been working hard on expanding a platform that is a full thing. It's not just a Christian heritage, but it's about the mining industry, the forestry industry, environment. We have a platform for pretty much everything, and people can read those policies at chpbc.ca. The policies are there. And I have answered numerous questionnaires over the last few days on every type of topic. So I don't think that people need to be necessarily put off by the fact that it's Christian, but it's more about the basic values that this country was founded on. Rule of law, common law, that sort of thing, and getting back to family-friendly values.
So so speaking of that, I was trying to do a little bit of research the other day, and I was attempting to find out if there had ever been a female elected as an MLA in Abbotsford. And I've brought this up a couple of times in different interviews, and I could not find one. I've been in Abbotsford myself for 25 years. I don't know if there was one before that. I've done a couple of net searches, and when they've changed the boundaries and different things, But I suppose some more research is granted. I will happily take anyone's comments, or if they want to send me an email and say, oh, Betty Smith back in 1942 was our MLA. But that would be unique. What perspective do you think, if you were elected, what perspective do you think that would change for Abbotsfordians? So what would um, what would having it being elected?
Personally, I think that women are far more collaborative. One of my favorite people, and I'm by no means NDP, but one of my favorite people is Rosemary Brown. She was a backbencher, but she got more legislation done because she collaborated and was nonpartisan and worked with all the parties. And I think that that is, the way that women work. Women know how to work together and cross party lines to get important issues addressed.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that they're more collaborative. Men have their egos, and women seem to have an ability to leave their egos at the door and get stuff done. So I'm sure I'm going to get letters on that. Someone's going to write me on that. But it is unique. We have what I think is an interesting observation anyway is that Abbotsford has historically elected very white and very old men, and there seems to be a lot of people in the mix this provincial election that are not that. We seem to have a good cross section, although we're still not approaching what I think are representative of our population. Obviously we're 50% women. We're also about 50% minority, a visible minority. So it's one of those amusing things that I bring up because we're guys that look like me are actually the minority in town, and we still seem to get elected. Although not me. I mean, that's pretty fair to say. So I think that would be unique, and I want to draw people's attention to that because I don't think enough is made of it. It takes a lot to run as a candidate, no matter who you are. But being faced with the statistic that no woman has been elected, I think it makes it even more important that that all candidates get some attention and get their voice heard. So anyway, I hope you. Yeah, I hope you.
I'll see you out there with your pom poms cheering me on, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I try as a journalist to remain impartial, but I think from a purely what's the word I'm looking for? From the perspective of wanting to see society be better, if I remove the party tag from all of our candidates, mm-hmm. and we decided to elect people all as independents, I think we would have a representation by population. We would have those different segments of our community would be better represented, and I think obviously one of those segments would be women. So I think it's about time.
I think that if we got rid of parties, we'd get rid of the party whip. That's mm-hmm. one thing that's unique about the Christian Heritage Party is we don't have a whip, and we're allowed to do what's in the best interest of our communities. And that's the reason that I chose to run for the Christian Heritage Party, because there is no party whip. So I can do what is best for my constituents. And I think that unfortunately that hasn't been the case for the mainstream parties. A lot of the time, we saw a vote years ago with John Van Dongen where he ended up just walking out because he couldn't represent the people and he couldn't, it was in conflict with the party whip. So, I think that that's important, that we're representatives of you. We're not representatives of the party. So we need to get that back on track.
So speaking of parties, and we've so far for the last few minutes we've gone pretty easy on the other parties. Many non-NDP candidates have have expressed their anger at the snap election call. But let's touch on some of the other issues, and feel free to pick them yourself. Both the BC Liberal platform and the BC NDP platform, one of which will likely form government in the next few, well, it might take a couple of weeks for it to count all the votes. But what do you see as some of their major issues that you feel is a mistake that the Christian Heritage Party would take a completely different tactic on? And feel free to touch on healthcare, seniors care, transit, homelessness, mental health, any of those issues. Do you see some that are a big mistake?
There's a number of social issues, and parental rights being taught that the NDP Infants Act needs to be repealed, that part of SOGI that has reinstated the 1933 Sexual Sterilization Act needs to be repealed, that we don't need to put gender dysphoric children through medical interventions that have been proven to cause cancer in menopausal women. I mean, why on earth would you do that to children? So, you know, I'm for protecting LGBTQ children and adults as well, and making sure that they have healthy bodies and don't become drug dependent. So these are important issues, but also farmers. Nobody talks about farming, and I've made that an issue this year. I took that to our leader and I said, we need to make this an issue. The median age of farmers is 60. They're going to be retiring. If we don't get young people into this, who's going to be producing our food? Right now, across the world, 23 countries are covered in locusts. There is a huge problem that is accruing, and they have now arrived in South America and are working their way north. We have a window of time to deal with this, and we have a window of time to look at how will we protect our agriculture and our farmers, not only for ourselves and our own food security, but to help the rest of the world. So we have an opportunity that is been attacked by the Liberals. The Liberals didn't want farmers to have secondary income that wasn't related to the farm industry itself. And, you know, we have to make sure that our farmers can have you know, at least a reasonable living. And then the other thing is getting young people into farming because of the cost of the land and the struggle with getting them connected to that land because they can't afford to buy. Then there's been the opposite pressure to get land out of the ALR and into industry, which is a big mistake because nobody else is going to be producing our food. We need to be producing it, and we need to be producing it for others as well.
I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I just happened to be reading the other day about the Mission Community Skills Center. Just recently, they've launched a program in conjunction with the small scale food processors to train agri-food entrepreneurs. And so I invite people to Google that if you're interested in agri-foods. It's very unique and a government subsidized program, although I have no idea whether it's NDP, Liberal or otherwise. I have no idea whether it's a federal government program or anything. But you're not the only one that, I point that out because you're not the only one that thinks that way. You know, food security, the ability to maintain production levels and keep our ALR land viable. These are all parts that I think are very important for the people of Abbotsford. That is our number one industry here, and so if we don't focus on it, and we'll lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Well, and we should appreciate the fact that during the economic recessions, the reason that Abbotsford-Mission did better was because we were buffered by agriculture. So we didn't suffer the way other communities did. So we need to appreciate our farmers, and we need to do everything we can to make life better for them and better for the community in general through food produced right here at home. This is another thing where, you know, you have to look at all this food that's being brought in from other parts of the world. People complain about the environment, but what's the carbon footprint when you're moving food all over the place? And then there's the risk of things like these Asian wasps that have come in that attack bees. And we've already had problems with other mites and bacteria and things attacking our bees. So these are things that also have to be considered. The ecosystems are a delicate business, and you have to work with nature, and you have to work with our farmers to come out with the best outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, it's I totally agree, and I think it's there's a lot there worth protecting, and you know that we're doing a good job on some levels because the U.S. wants to slap tariffs on our blueberries. So you always know when you have a good product, the Americans would like it to not come to their country. Um, we have more expensive labor, more expensive land, and yet we still happen to produce a better quality, lower price product than the U.S. So I think there's a ton there to, that's another issue I bet you and I could talk about for about an hour. But a good one to bring up, and also a unique one in that most of our other interviews, we didn't touch on farming very much, and we didn't get too deep into it. So I again invite people to contact you to keep going with that discussion.
Mhm.
So as we're kind of like as we're making our way to the finish line on this interview, because nobody wants to hear me talk for much longer, I'm sure. So we'll give the people an opportunity to contact you. But I would like to talk a little bit about the election itself. So historically, we've got people mailing in their ballots and advanced voting in perhaps to a percentage as high as 40% of all votes will be cast before election day, meaning that the results won't come perhaps for 2 or 3 weeks after the 24th. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is going to change elections forever, or are we going to go back to normal once COVID has passed us by, if that ever happens?
Well, I think that it remains to be seen how things will go in the future. It is very convenient to do a mail-in ballot, and and people are working very odd hours and working from home at this point. So it remains to be seen. But I think that it's going to make it more difficult for smaller parties because it takes longer time to pull your resources together. You're not as equipped as the larger parties to come out of the gate ready to run, and so your message gets missed. A lot of the time, people early vote, then they miss the message, and I've had many people say, "Oh, if I'd only known, I would have voted for you." And yeah, so I think that's the problem. Even in this election, by the time everybody was signed up to go, we had about 2 weeks before early voting came out. So, it's not a lot of time to try and get your message out there. And you're inundated with questionnaires, and everybody wants a piece of your time. You've got debates. There's all kinds of things that are taking up your time. And those debates are shaped. It's not like this interview where I can talk freely. And I really appreciate this. And I thank you for it, Vince. But most debates, most questions are all shaped. They want you to go in a certain direction. They have a particular agenda that they want to know about. The same with the questionnaires. So there's not a lot of opportunity for people to just be genuine and talk about what's on their heart. And so I really appreciate that with you today, Vince.
Well, thanks. And I share your concern about the small parties getting squeezed, and they are a lot anyway. But for those listening, I'd like to remind you that having 4 or 5 parties run is not vote splitting. It's called democracy. And for those of you that think that the small parties don't matter, I think the BC Greens, who have basically held the balance of power during the NDP minority government, would argue that. And so if we don't have choice, we end up looking like the tribal warfare that is going on down in the States right now. And I think
Yeah.
I think every Canadian would prefer to have our system over their system. So yeah, so keep on running, even if it's for a small party, because your voice your voice should get heard. And
Well, David took down Goliath, didn't he?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what have we missed? Is there anything that you have on your mind that you'd like to talk about today? Have I?
Well, I think the other thing that no other parties are even talking about is the debt. And the fact that the debt is accruing at a tremendous rate. We're almost $73 billion in debt provincially. trillion in the federal level. And then you add to that every province, every civic. We're doing pretty good in Abbotsford, I think, but you know, there's a lot of cities that aren't and are in debt. So I think when you add that and the individual debt, I think debt has to be looked at. It's a very serious thing. And, you know, there hasn't been really a review of the government. Everybody just makes a new budget. It's really not new. It's just the old budget, padded a little, cost of living increase, and then they put it in again. I think it's time to review every department and start getting rid of all the dead wood, all the old files, all the inefficient things that don't work, things that aren't maybe even really all that relevant anymore. And we could free up a lot more resources. I think we could incentivize, you know, and the people who work in the different bureaucracies to do something about that. And the same thing with charities and the social issues in town. We need to keep people working together rather than in silos, duplication of services, this sort of thing. And we can do so much more. And we don't need a lot of money. I was a single parent for 25 years. I raised 2 children, and I didn't make tons of money when I was doing it. But I spent a lot of time with them, and I invested into their lives. And as a result, my daughter has completed a master's degree in economics with a minor in environmental management. She works for the federal government. And my son is a beautiful person. He's worked very, very hard, has a lovely wife and a home with 2 children in Mission. And he's always been entrepreneurial in a sense. So, you know, these things are what's important, is investing what we have in the things that will make a difference. And all these promises are airy-fairy that are going on right now. If you don't have tax dollars coming in, you don't have money to put out. And so we need to get the economy going. We need to get businesses strengthened. We need to look after the people through our different charities being organized and working together. And I think that as a woman running for an MLA, I can bring that.
Well said. I think you've just demonstrated that you're already successful, no matter what happens after the voting. Sounds like you got some great kids there, and I'm trying to raise a pack of them myself. So that's a much harder job, I think, than being an MLA. But what do we know? Anyways, thank you so much for joining me today. Just a reminder to everyone watching, you can catch up with Aeriol at chpbc.ca. Click on Candidates 2020 and you'll find her there. Or you could, like I say, the easiest way to find you is to Google you. It's pretty hard to go wrong with Google. But give the folks your phone number and your email again. I'm sure I'll get that wrong. Your email is Alderking@startmail.com. And my phone number is 604-825-7198. Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Good luck on Saturday.
Thanks, Jen.
We'll see you again soon.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye now.